Good morning, Happy Valley, and welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and joined as always when we're talking Penn State football recruiting, my co-host and Happy Valley Insider's very own Dylan Callahan-Crawley. Dylan, recruiting's heating up. Season's about to end. We'll probably talk some college football playoff later on this week, maybe next week, depending on whenever we get to that. But recruiting talk is starting to heat up again. It's my favorite time of year because it's madness, basically, and I love the madness. So let's just kick it off with one of the bigger items. Chaz Coleman just committed a couple weeks ago, and now he's visiting Ohio State following an offer from the Buckeyes this past week. How worried should Penn State fans be about that one?
Yeah, first, early signing period is just 8 days away from when we're recording this. I think this goes up on Wednesday morning, so 7 days from when this is going up on YouTube and wherever you find our podcast. So everything we talk about here, there's a large chunk of it is going to play out pretty fast over the next week. Some of it perhaps could go into the February signing period, but I imagine a lot of these players we talk about are going to make the decision within the next couple of days. Starting with Chaz Coleman, as we reported on our boards earlier today, confirmed with our friends over on the Ohio State side here at Rivals that the Buckeyes are in the process of planning a official visit with Penn State defensive end Chaz Coleman for this upcoming weekend. Buckeyes obviously hosted Michigan in their biggest game of the year. Even if the records necessarily don't say it is, obviously it is the game. So it's going to be a great atmosphere there or out in Columbus. How worried should Penn State be? I think Penn State should be very worried here. I mean, this is Ohio State Ohio State coaching staff that really doesn't offer recruits, I think, late in the cycle unless they think they have a decent shot at flipping a recruit if they're uncommitted. Or if they're committed elsewhere and they're uncommitted, they obviously think they have a great chance of landing that recruit. I would say that is the case here with Coleman. I think Penn State's going to have to fight like hell to keep Coleman in this class. If they lose him, it's going to be a tough loss, I think, because I think he has the most raw upside of anybody on that defense, of the defensive class committed to Penn State. But he is a bit of a project as well, so it's not necessarily going to be one that maybe hurts Penn State in 2025, 2026, but definitely one that we can look back down in 2027, 2028 if he's with the Buckeyes and performing as one that maybe got away from Penn State, if it does go that way. Still a lot to go there. Still obviously have this weekend to play out, but definitely one that is going to be, I think, tough for Penn State to hold on to here in the final days before their early signing period.
So kind of redundant to ask you this because I feel like you already kind of answered it, but gun to your head, does he flip?
I would probably lean towards him flipping.
Yeah, that's a shame because they literally just got him 16 days ago, 17 days ago, depending on when you're listening to this. But moving on a little bit, another guy that Penn State fans might have to be worried about is Jayden Woods, the fourth highest ranked recruit in the Rivals rankings, number 188 overall in the nation. Jayden Woods comes from Mill Valley High School in Kansas. Took an official visit to Penn State in the summer, committed after that official visit, visited Florida this past weekend. Now, Florida was one earlier in the cycle that I thought they would probably fire Billy Napier, but it sounds like he saved his job, which is incredible. But how worried should Penn State fans be there, considering he did just visit campus?
Yeah, Billy Napier feels like maybe this year's Neil Brown in terms of Neil Brown seemingly. I don't know if
it's a great comparison.
Napier really saved his job this year. I think it's more of perhaps Florida doesn't have the resources right now to go through another firing at this point in time, but I'm not sure of the specifics down there. But I think it's going to be very similar to Neil Brown, who saved his job last year and now looks like he's going to be fired at the end of this season at some point. We'll see how both those play out. But yeah, Jayden Woods visited Florida over the weekend, a little bit surprised in terms of came out of nowhere, but at the same time, you mentioned how Florida was a contender for him before. I believe they were one of his finalists, so it's not surprising from that aspect. But at the same time, anytime a player is taking an official visit this late in the cycle, it is something that definitely raises your eyebrow, makes it something that you have to watch pretty closely. Florida obviously has decent NIL resources. It's not great in terms of SEC terms, but it's still good, and they definitely probably have some money they could throw at Woods if NIL becomes a factor here. Right now, I think Penn State probably feels decent about where they are with Woods. I would personally think Woods stays committed to the Nittany Lions. I think if you look at the trajectory of those two programs, they are going in two wildly different directions. Um, and you know, I know players don't always consider this, but if you look at the two coaches, I think there's one that definitely has long-term stability where they are, and the other one I have doubts will be there at the end of the 2025 season, and it's not James Franklin that I have doubts about. So um, I think it would be a little crazy for somebody to leave Penn State for a opportunity at Florida. But you know, it's not my recruitment, it's not my life, it's not my decision. That's just my personal 2 cents, and we'll see what Jayden ultimately does. I've not been able to connect with Jayden. Um, and last time I checked our Florida side, I don't believe they were able to either yet. So we'll see what plays out there, but definitely something to watch here as we head towards the early signing period next week.
Yeah, definitely something to monitor closely. Kind of moving on from recruiting, it's not Christmas time, but almost Flipmas time. Yeah, it was kind of corny. I won't do that again. Uh,
A little corny. It's all right.
but anyway, we got a couple flip targets for Penn State from the other end. Now they might lose one or two this cycle, towards the end of this cycle, with the two we just mentioned, Chaz Coleman, Jayden Woods. They might keep one. They might keep both. Who knows? But they also might flip some guys. So let's start it off with the biggest name on the board that everyone just keeps talking about, and it's Brandon Finney, the McDonough cornerback, committed to Oregon. Now, there was some talk that he was getting close to flipping to Penn State. There was some talk that his family members were pushing Penn State. Now it sounds like momentum's swinging a little bit back in favor of the Ducks.
Yeah, it's definitely one where I think Penn State was trending well for him not early, well, earlier this month, even in October, they were trending well for him.
Hmm.
Um, but just couldn't get it across the finish line. And we've seen this happen in the past with a few recruits as well. They're in a good spot, just can't get it past the finish line, and they end up going elsewhere. It sounds like Oregon has regained some of the momentum with the Brandon Finney recruitment. He was just out there this weekend when they had a bye week, which is big. And it doesn't sound like right now that he's going to be visiting anywhere this weekend. Um, I've checked in regarding Penn State potentially hosting him. Nothing there yet in terms of that. So it definitely seems like Oregon may have done enough here to hold on to Finney. This is a recruitment that we will be able to talk about a lot more on the boards after it wraps up. But definitely one that uh, is just in a way a lot of external factors that are affecting this one in as few words as possible without giving away too much. Um, and definitely a lot that went into this recruitment. We'll see if Penn State can make a late push here or a late play, but if I my gut right now is saying that he probably is going to end up sticking with Oregon here, which is a big win for the Ducks. The good news for Penn State obviously is cornerback is a position in which they recruit very very well. So while it definitely hurts and it would have made a great secondary class into an elite one, I think Penn State will still be okay without Finney, but definitely one that they would have loved to add to this class and still would too if they can find a way to do so in the next 8 days.
Yeah, obviously Darius Dixon coming in, highest ranked recruit I think currently.
Yeah,
Yeah, easily
Jameer
actually.
Joseph,
Jameer Joseph, very
Xavier
good.
Thomas.
And then AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber found in the portal this offseason. AJ Harris was a great nab.
Yeah,
Jalen Kimber, honestly, when I first got him, I thought, whatever. But he played really well this year.
yeah. Kimber is really interesting. Off topic quickly, somebody you look at the PFF grades never really is going to grade out well,
Hmm.
but the stats are what they are, and he really has not given up a ton of damage this season through the air. Which at the end of the day, I don't think it matters how you get the results. The only thing that matters is the end result, and the end result for Kimber this year has been great. And like you said, AJ Harris has been phenomenal this year. He is going to come into next year, I think, with the potential of being guy who could go first round in 2026 if he continues to
Very,
play at this level.
very easily. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, they'll have options in the transfer portal if they choose to go transfer portal for another cornerback.
Mhm.
But their 2025 recruiting class in the secondary right now is really good with those three that we mentioned as well.
A lot of youngsters back there too. Zion Tracy, Elliott
Yeah,
Washington.
Tracy has been playing really great too.
Yeah. So not really too worried there, especially with Terry Smith back there. There shouldn't
Yeah,
be a worry
they'll
whatsoever.
they'll,
Now,
they'll always quarterback, running back, tight end are the three positions. I really think if you're a Penn State fan, you just kind of let the coaching staffs do what they do, take who they
yep.
take. Don't second guess them because Penn State recruits those three positions better than anybody else.
Now, I do question
Arguably.
him a little bit when it comes to wide receiver recruiting. That kind of segues us into our next player, Lex Cyrus. There were some feelings that he might
Yeah,
flip to Penn State over the past month and a half, 2 months,
yeah,
but it's kind of flip flopped back to South Carolina's favor. And they just recently just hosted him and 2026 commit Messiah Mickens, who was also on the visit with him to South Carolina back on the 18th or 16th, 16th. So how worried, or I shouldn't say how worried, is there any chance Penn State can get back in this one, or is it just kind of too little too late?
I think it's definitely one that's still worth watching until pen meets paper.
Hmm.
But I think Penn State was able to get him on a campus there this fall. I think twice, maybe it's been three times. So it was twice. Covered a lot of teams, covered a lot of players. It all blends together at this point. But they've hosted him this fall multiple times. They've
Yeah.
been in his ear a ton. He's obviously right down the street at Susquehanna Township.
Hmm.
But at the same time, he's been to South Carolina, I think, two times in November alone. You said Messiah Mickens went with him the last visit. I do not expect anything to happen with Messiah Mickens. Mickens, I think, is firmly committed to Penn State.
Yeah.
Um, I think that was just kind of taking in a top matchup, going with a good friend in Cyrus to that game and enjoying it. With Cyrus, though, been there a couple times. When South Carolina a couple weeks ago was what 3-3, and you're questioning how could this season go for them down the stretch, I think it was much more of an argument that, hey, depending on what happens, you know, uh, this could be something to watch. But South Carolina's won 5 games, is one of the hottest teams in the country in the SEC. And they're honestly a win away. They're that LSU game earlier this season away from probably being in the college football playoffs right now.
Yeah.
So I think their season has helped them a lot in retaining Lex Cyrus. Um, I know there's a lot going for Penn State in terms of those external factors that may be going against them in terms of like the Brandon Finney recruitment. But Cyrus has seemingly been wanted to be a player who gets away from Pennsylvania, kind of goes down south, cements his own legacy somewhere else rather
Hmm.
than in his backyard.
Okay. So likely to stay with South Carolina, it feels like right now.
Yeah.
Next up, another Pennsylvania guy, Southern Lehigh High School tight end Andrew Olesh, visited campus back on November 2nd for an unofficial visit, then went to Notre Dame, then went to Michigan this past weekend. Do we think he sticks with Michigan? Because there's a lot of pull going to Michigan now, especially with Bryce Underwood flipping from LSU to the Wolverines.
Yeah, I think the Bryce Underwood commitment definitely helps the Wolverines here. That's a big time quarterback commit that
Hmm.
they spent good money on.
Oh yeah, that's what
But
it sounds like.
yeah, I still think this is a Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon battle going down to the wire here. I think it could go really any way. If I had to guess, I think Penn State probably would be the best chance of flipping him. My gut says I think he sticks with Michigan right now, but uh, that's not if I had to put a confidence level on that, it's a very low confidence in terms of that, just because I do think it could go really any way right now. But Michigan definitely helped themselves with Bryce Underwood, and he was just on campus this weekend as well.
Okay. Next up, another Pennsylvania kid, Central Catholic athlete slash linebacker slash Mr. Do It All for Central Catholic, actually. Bradley Gompers. Bradley Gompers committed to Duke since back in mid June. Penn State offered in mid September. You know, James Franklin had that little press conference where he's like, "We love Central Catholic guys. Like, we love them," pointing basically at Bradley Gompers without saying his name because that's an NCAA violation, which is stupid. Besides the point, he visited Penn State back on October 5th. Then Michigan offered a couple weeks later, and then Virginia offered, and Miami offered, and Vanderbilt offered, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what's the feeling there? Because I have a hard time seeing him sticking with Duke, no matter what.
That a couple of weeks ago I would have said the same thing, but
Hmm.
we are 8 days away from signing day, and he's still committed to Duke.
True, but he was at Michigan this
And
weekend.
he has a very good relationship with Manny Diaz, that relationship that goes back to Penn State. Diaz never offered him at Penn State, but once Diaz got to Duke, he was one of, I think, Duke's first offers.
Hmm.
And I think that goes a long way for Gompers right now. I think Michigan's making a strong push. They have one of his former teammates up there. Um, so I think Penn State's out of this one. I think it's Duke or Michigan.
Okay.
Um, I think it'd be cool if he sticks with Duke. From a storyline perspective, Duke holds on to a kid despite, two Big Ten powers push for him. That would be
Yeah.
a cool story. But yeah, you can't definitely rule out Michigan here in the last couple of days. But Penn
Mhm.
State, if he goes anywhere but Duke, it's not going to be Penn State. I think it's going to be Michigan. But
Gotcha.
we'll see what happens here in the closing days.
Yeah. Now I know he said he visited last weekend. I misread that. That was a month ago. October 26th, he went for a Michigan official visit. October 25th,
Right
whatever that was,
back.
that weekend. There's one other name which I can kind of just take care of for the time being. Zahir Mathis, number 55 overall in the country, number one in the state of Pennsylvania. Just decommitted from Ohio State back in November 18th. He was committed there since January 10th. Now, Zahir Mathis is ranked really high, but he's dropped a lot in the rankings over the past cycle, the past update, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
He's went from number 6 in the country back in June 2023 to now down to 55 in the country. So his potential is still there, I would say, but he just hasn't really gotten any better in high school either. I think there's a lot of work to do there still. And that's a big reason why Ohio State kind of didn't mind. I mean, they would have liked to keep him, of course, but they didn't mind him decommitting because then they'll just go after a Chaz Coleman, for example. But Zahir Mathis, what do you feel like Penn State has a shot there? I know he visited campus a couple times so far.
Yeah, everything I think right now points towards Penn State kind of moving off of, or they have moved off Zahir Mathis in recent weeks. And
Hmm.
I think that recruitment is definitely one that is not going to end in the next 8 days. I think that one goes to February. Um,
Makes sense.
but I think I think this recruitment is truly wide open. And a lot's gonna play out here over the next few months. But I don't see him ending up at Penn State.
Hmm.
I think they have moved on and are comfortable in doing so with Mathis for I think much of the similar reasons Ohio State has done. I think Zahir has a chance to be a really good player, but I've never been super impressed with his film. Just never has been a truly dominant player on film. Seen him in person a couple times. Never been overly impressed. I think he has a lot of potential, but kind of like Chaz Coleman, I don't think necessarily his best years are right. Right in the near future. I think his best years are, or what I should say. I don't think he's making an impact in the near future. I think wherever he goes, he's making an impact. 4 years down the road.
Definitely interesting stuff. Last but not least, Mac Brown randomly fired today after saying
Yeah,
he was coming back next season. Sounds like the UNC brass didn't kind of agree with Mac Brown saying he was coming back.
yeah,
But it is amazing how all these Hall of Fame coaches have just kind of been just pushed to the side a little bit. Nick Saban was maybe the only one that was allowed to leave on his own terms, basically,
yeah.
and left on good terms, I should say. But regardless, that is good news for Penn State. Now, why is that good news for Penn State? We reported a couple weeks ago on the Lions Den forum that Penn State was after Bryce Baker, 2025 quarterback commit for UNC. I actually talked to him after we found out Penn State contacted him. He basically just told me, yeah, that's cool and all. I love it. I love the interest. I'm appreciative of it. But at the end of the day, I'm still a Tar Heel, and that's what I want to be. I want to stick with UNC, North Carolina kid, so it makes a lot of sense there. But new coaching staff is going to change some things. We don't know what that UNC team is going to look like and or who they're even going to hire. Does Penn State have a legitimate shot of flipping him and finally getting a second 2025 quarterback that they've been wanting for the past 6, 7 months?
Yep. Um, I think there's a chance. I mean, apologize for the little one in the back, getting
Hey.
antsy. But yeah, definitely watching for Bryce Baker here down the stretch. I think he's planning on enrolling at North Carolina early, so if he decides to decommit from the Tar Heels here in the next few days, Penn State's in a really good position here, I think, for potentially a big steal at the end of the cycle. I think he has a chance. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. Our analysts believe so as well. Definitely somebody I think who could compete for a starting job. Well, I don't know in 2025 because I think there's still a quality chance Drew returns in 2025. But say Drew returns in 2025 and you have an open in 2026, I think Baker could very much compete for a starting quarterback job come 2026 with the likes of Nathan Grunkemeyer, who obviously would be a redshirt sophomore at that point.
Yeah, looking at Bryce Baker, I know our national analyst, Adam Gorney, national recruiting director, sorry, Adam Gorney actually pointed out 5 recruits that North Carolina's new head coach has to reach out to immediately. And he was number 2 on the list. Obviously, number 1, David Sanders, North Carolina, number 4 overall offensive lineman, blah, blah, blah. But Bryce Baker's interesting because not only is Penn State going to push him, but LSU just lost their quarterback commit in Bryce Underwood to Michigan. Texas A&M just lost one of their quarterback commit, or their quarterback commit. So there's a lot of big name teams that are going to be after a quarterback, and if Bryce Baker's open for business, these teams are not going to be afraid to throw money at him and try to see what they can do here. But we know that Penn State's wanted a quarterback for the past couple months now, so
Yeah,
this
they've
could
been
be
kicking
it.
the tires on a lot of, not a lot, but a handful of players. Also, I do know that LSU has reached out to Bryce as well
Okay.
here. And obviously they just lost Underwood. So, but, is LSU something that sticks out to Bryce? Because, I mean, I don't think he is, but I'm not sure the stability right now that Brian Kelly has down at LSU.
That's a very good point. I don't know if he'll even be there at the end of the season, to be honest with you.
So, I think, again, that's one of those things like you talk about Jayden Woods, Florida, and Penn State. From a
Hmm.
stability standpoint, Penn State makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
uh, if Baker wants development, I know Penn State isn't the when people talk about quarterback development, Penn State never gets talked about. And yeah, a lot of Penn State quarterbacks have had their shortcomings. You can argue that Penn State, until Drew, and even some would still argue, has not had a great quarterback in a long, long time. Drew still has his shortcomings, yes, but I think Drew is the best quarterback they've absolutely had since Kerry Collins. And I think Drew has the
Sure.
potential to be a first round pick. But you look at it, every quarterback that has started under James Franklin has been drafted in the NFL.
Yeah, I never actually thought of it like that. That's a
Yeah,
good point.
and outside of Hackenberg, they've all seen NFL action. Um,
Not to mention they have a dedicated quarterback coach. Not a
they
lot
have
of
a
teams have
dedicated quarterback
a guy
coach
that's dedicated to
in
that.
Danny O'Brien, who's gets nothing but love from anybody you talk to about him,
Hmm.
including recruits. I mean, Penn State is very much. I mean, I know they haven't landed a lot of these top end quarterbacks, but there is a reason they have continuously, despite well, at times slightly above average quarterback play over the last however long, the on have been in the conversation with top quarterback recruits, and um, over the last year or so. And I think that's a lot to do with Danny O'Brien. But you look at it, James
Yeah.
Franklin has put quarterbacks in the NFL. Even the guys he's recruited and have gone elsewhere, have gone on to be drafted. Not necessarily having good NFL careers necessarily all the time. I mean, uh, Sean is still in the NFL, obviously, but who knows how long that's going to last. Trace lasted a few years. Christian didn't pan out, but it is what it is. Um, and I know Will never started at Penn State, but Will was recruited by Penn State. Um, and obviously his career's kind of gone meh to bad or first 2 years. But yeah, Penn State can develop quarterbacks to a pretty decent degree, obviously, if they're in the NFL. So I think Penn State probably deserves a little bit more respect when it comes to quarterbacks. And at the end of the day, Drew has a really good chance of being a first round draft pick come next, whether it's this spring or next spring. And It may just be that 2026 spring.
Yeah. I mean, we'll dive into that in a future podcast for
Yeah,
sure. I think once you get to the combine, those measurables are going to be through the roof, and people are going to
yeah.
start drooling a little bit. But
It's a big decision coming up for him, and it's
yeah,
going to be a really interesting one. And it'll be interesting to see when he makes that decision. Does he wait to see what Penn State does in the transfer portal? Can they bring in a top flight wide receiver perhaps
mhm,
for him to throw to? And if they can't, does he then decide to go to the NFL? Yeah, I
true.
think that's something to watch that when he makes that decision.
Yeah. Now, is there anyone else you want to talk about before we sign off here? Because that's really all I got in terms of potential flips that I could think of.
Baker, Mathis. I'm just trying to going over the people
Baker,
we talked about.
Mathis,
We talked about
Cyrus,
Mathis. We talked about Coleman, Woods, Baker, Cyrus,
Gompers,
Gompers,
Olesh.
Olesh.
I think
Two
that's really
guys,
it.
brief mention.
Yeah, go for it.
Baltimore wide receiver Romero
Ison.
Ison
Yeah,
is on.
I believe so.
Still committed to USC, but wouldn't be surprised if he flips that commitment. I know Penn State has been in the conversation. I believe it was on campus. I can't remember at this point. It was Washington or Ohio
Whiteout
State.
or yeah, one of those two.
But he was on campus earlier this month. Um, quiet, so not much there to really report on. Could he flip to Penn State? We'll see, but definitely just a prospect regionally that Penn State has been, in on at times to kind of keep an eye on. And then Purdue tight end commit, make sure I get his first name right. Brian Kurtovich out of Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. Somebody who came for Penn State earlier this year, didn't get an offer then, still committed to Purdue. If Andrew Olesh doesn't go Penn State to what, I do wonder if we see Penn State offer Kurtovich here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and potentially flipping the last second. I think if he gets an offer from Penn State, he's flipping.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting.
Hey everybody, I know we already said we covered everybody. That was a lie. We forgot a major one. That's Quincy Porter Jr., the four-star wide receiver out of Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. Ohio State commit since June. Penn State is making a legitimate and extensive push for the four-star prospect here, top 120 prospect here on Rivals, number one player in the state of New Jersey, with the early signing period coming up next week. What it will happen here remains to be seen. But Penn State is a legitimate threat to Ohio State when it comes to potentially flipping Porter away from the Buckeyes. It's hard to bet against the Buckeyes, obviously, considering their wide receiver production history over the last couple of years. But Penn State definitely has that ability of early playing time to potentially sell to Porter. So that'll be something to watch here in the next 8 days, but definitely want to add that one here before we truly sign off. So until we meet again to talk about Penn State recruiting. Have a good one, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great Thanksgiving. And if we have any major breaking news here on Penn State Rivals Have Valley Insider, we'll be sure to release an emergency podcast to do so. But until then, have a good one, everybody. And once again, have a great Thanksgiving.
But for me and Dylan, that's pretty much all we got. If you haven't already, check out our Twitter page and our Instagram at Penn State Rivals. On Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, we're giving away this Penn State ice mold. Also comes with your own little whiskey, bourbon, whatever cocktail you like type of glass. Basically, all it is it gives you a little mold that gives you Penn State ice cubes every single time, which is kind of cool, a little different. So check that out. We're gonna pick a random winner on one of our next podcasts. I'm not sure when, but that's on our Twitter feed. Also, check us out on YouTube, etc. PennState.rivals.com. If you are listening to this on Thursday, November 28th. Happy Thanksgiving, number one. Number two, we have a Black Friday sale going on. 70% off the site. Just go to the site. You'll see the little clickable banner, pennstate.rivals.com, and you can sign up right now. 70% off for the entire year. That means around $25, I think it is. Maybe less than that. I forget. And you get the $30, and you get the entire year, $100 value, $120 value, actually. So that's where we have all our recruit scoop, our message boards. Everyone loves the wrestling forum. Everyone loves the Lions Den forum, the Penn State football forum, of course, as well. A lot of hectic craziness on those boards, but a lot of fun, too. So check us out on there. But for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.